They thought blocking an ambulance would make their point stronger. They didn't know they were dealing with Marcus Chen, a paramedic who'd lost one patient too many to traffic delays. What happened next would spark a national debate about the right to protest versus the right to live, launch 1,000 think pieces, and ultimately save more lives than anyone could have imagined. But on that sweltering Tuesday afternoon in downtown Seattle, all Marcus knew was that a 6-year-old girl had exactly 8 minutes before her airways closed forever, and 200 protesters stood between him and the hospital. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment if you've ever been stuck in traffic during an emergency. I guarantee your story isn't as insane as what Marcus Chen experienced that day. This is the story of how one paramedic's split-second decision turned him into either a hero or a villain, depending on which side of the protest line you stood on. It's about how saving one life nearly destroyed another, and how sometimes the greatest act of protest is refusing to let ideology trump humanity. Marcus Chen wasn't supposed to be working that shift. The 34-year-old paramedic had just pulled a double the night before, responding to everything from heart attacks to homeless overdoses in Seattle's underbelly. But when Jimmy Ramirez called in sick, probably hungover from his birthday celebration, Marcus answered his phone on the second ring. "Yeah, I'll cover it," he said, already reaching for his uniform. That split-second decision would change everything. The call came in at 2:47 p.m. Unit 19, we have a code 3 pediatric emergency. 6-year-old female, severe anaphylactic reaction. Location, 1847 Pine Street, apartment 4B. Patient is conscious but airways compromising. Mother reports accidental peanut exposure. Marcus's partner that day was Jake Morrison, a rookie with only 6 months under his belt but sharp instincts and steady hands. As Marcus fired up the ambulance, Jake was already pulling up the fastest route on their tablet. "Shit," Jake muttered. "Marcus, we got a problem. There's a massive protest blocking the intersection at 5th and Union. That's our primary route to Children's." "How massive?" Marcus asked, flipping on the sirens as they pulled out of the station. "Social media says about 200 people. They've been there since noon. It's that housing justice group. They're protesting the new development." Jake's fingers flew over the screen. Alternative route adds 4 minutes. For minutes. In the world of anaphylactic shock, for minutes was the difference between a scary story kids told at sleepovers and a funeral nobody ever recovered from. Marcus had seen it too many times. The way a child's face would swell, their lips turning blue, the panic in their eyes as they realized they couldn't breathe. His own sister had died that way 20 years ago, waiting for an ambulance that got stuck in rush-hour traffic. "We take the primary route," Marcus said, his voice leaving no room for debate. Jake shot him a look. "Marcus, protocol says." "Protocol says we take the fastest route to save a life. That's 5th and Union." Marcus pressed harder on the accelerator. "Radio dispatch. Tell them about the obstruction. Maybe they can get PD there." As Seattle's skyline blurred past their windows, Jake made the call. The dispatcher's response wasn't encouraging. "Unit 19, be advised, Seattle PD reports all available units are managing the protest perimeter. They cannot guarantee clearance. Recommend alternative routing." Marcus's jaw tightened. In his 12 years as a paramedic, he'd lost 17 patients. He remembered every name, every face, every family member who'd asked him why he couldn't save their loved one. 17 too many. He wasn't adding an 18-year-old to that list. Not today. "Marcus," Jake said quietly, "I get it, man. But if something goes wrong, then it goes wrong. But that little girl gets her shot at growing up." Marcus glanced at his partner. "You don't have to agree with me, but I need to know you've got my back." Jake was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Always, brother. Let's save a life." They were 3 minutes out when they could see the crowd. The intersection was completely blocked, a sea of signs and bodies. Marcus could make out the chants even through the closed windows. "Housing is a human right. Fight, fight, fight." "Update from a mother," Jake reported, reading from his tablet. "Patient's name is Lily Patterson. Breathing is labored. She's using her EpiPen now, but it's not helping much. Mom's panicking." Marcus picked up the radio. Unit 19 to dispatch. We're approaching the protest site. We're going to attempt passage. Please notify all relevant parties. He turned to Jake. Hold on tight and start recording on the dash cam. Whatever happens, I want it documented. The intersection of 5th and Union looked like a festival from a distance. Colorful signs bobbing above a mass of people. The energy palpable even from inside the ambulance. But as Marcus approached with sirens wailing and lights flashing, the festive atmosphere took on a different character. This wasn't a celebration. It was a standoff. Sarah Martinez stood at the center of it all, a megaphone in one hand and a sign reading "People over Profit" in the other. The 28-year-old activist had been organizing protests in Seattle for 5 years, and she ran them like a general commanding troops. Her voice carried over the crowd, orchestrating their movements with practiced precision. "Hold the line," she shouted as the ambulance approached. "They'll try to use emergency vehicles to break our solidarity. Don't let them divide us." Marcus brought the ambulance to a stop about 50 feet from the human wall blocking the intersection. He hit the air horn, 3 long blasts that usually sent cars scrambling to the curb. The protesters didn't budge. If anything, they linked arms tighter, their chants growing louder. "Jesus Christ," Jake breathed. "They're not moving." Marcus tried the PA system. "This is Seattle Fire Department Unit 19. We have a critical pediatric emergency. Please clear a path immediately." Sarah Martinez raised her megaphone in response. "Nice try. We know the developers' tactics. Hiring fake emergency vehicles won't work." She turned to the crowd. "Stay strong. They want us to break. Are you fucking kidding me?" Jake's professionalism cracked. "Does she think we're fake?" Marcus was already on the radio. "Dispatch, Unit 19. Protesters are refusing to clear. They believe we're not legitimate. Please advise. Unit 19, maintain position. We're attempting to contact protest organizers." "We don't have time for negotiations," Marcus muttered. He looked at Jake. "I'm going to talk to them directly." Marcus, no. But Marcus was already out of the ambulance, jogging toward the crowd with his hands visible and non-threatening. Several protesters immediately pointed phone cameras at him. Good, he thought. Let them record this. "Ma'am," he called to Sarah Martinez, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen too much death. "I'm paramedic Chen with SFD. We have a 6-year-old girl dying from anaphylactic shock. She has minutes. Please let us through." Sarah lowered her megaphone, studying him with suspicious eyes. How convenient. The day we threaten their billion-dollar development, suddenly there's an emergency that requires this exact route. "Her name is Lily Patterson," Marcus said, stepping closer. "She lives at 1847 Pine. Her mother called 911 17 minutes ago. Every second we stand here talking, her airways close a little more. By the time you verify my credentials, she'll be dead." "Then take another route," Sarah shot back. "We're not moving." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger. He'd moved past anger years ago. This was the icy clarity that came when he realized he was dealing with someone who'd confused their cause with their conscience. "I'm going back to my ambulance," he said calmly. "I'm going to drive forward at 2 miles per hour. That gives everyone plenty of time to move. Anyone who doesn't move is making a choice to value their political statement over a child's life. That's on you, not me. That's assault." Sarah shouted after him. "You touch any of us with that vehicle, and I'll have you arrested." Marcus turned back, and for just a moment, Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her step back. "Ma'am, I've held 17 dead patients in my arms. 17 people I couldn't save. Most of them died because someone, somewhere, decided something else was more important than their life. I'm not making it 18 today." He walked back to the ambulance with measured steps, ignoring the phones recording him, the shouted questions, the creative profanity from some protesters. Jake watched him climb back in with a mixture of admiration and dread. "What's the plan?" Jake asked. "We're going through," Marcus said, putting the ambulance in drive. "Slow and steady. They'll move. And if they don't..." Marcus glanced at the clock. They'd already lost 3 minutes. Lily Patterson had 5 left, maybe 6 if she was lucky. Then we find out what matters more. their voice hollow. And we were so eager to fight that we never questioned where the ammunition came from. The grand jury returned 37 indictments. Riverside's entire executive team faced federal charges ranging from conspiracy to fraud to involuntary manslaughter for the protest-related deaths. The company's stock price plummeted 90% in 3 days. By week's end, Riverside Development Group had filed for bankruptcy. But Marcus found little satisfaction in their downfall. He'd been reinstated with full honors, even promoted to field training supervisor, but the weight of everything that had happened sat heavy on his shoulders. The death threats had mostly stopped, replaced by interview requests and speaking invitations he had no interest in accepting. The real change came from an unexpected source, the protesters themselves. It started with a small group of activists who'd been at the intersection that day. They'd watched the videos, seen Lily's press conference, learned about Riverside's manipulation. The cognitive dissonance nearly broke some of them, realizing they'd almost killed a child while believing they were fighting for justice. Tom Nguyen, a veteran organizer who'd been part of Sarah's inner circle, reached out to Marcus through Rebecca. "We need to talk," his message said. "Not to apologize, though we owe you that too, but to figure out how to keep this from happening again." The meeting took place at a community center in the Central District, neutral ground for everyone involved. Marcus arrived to find 20 activists waiting, some he recognized from the protest, others new faces drawn by recent events. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. "We fucked up," Tom said bluntly, starting the meeting. "We let our anger at the system blind us to the human cost of our tactics. We need to own that and figure out how to do better." A young woman raised her hand. "I keep thinking about that little girl. I have a daughter her age. If it had been my baby in that ambulance." She couldn't finish, but it wasn't. Another activist interjected. "And we can't lose sight of why we were protesting. People are still being displaced. Families are still losing their homes." "Nobody's saying stop protesting," Tom replied. "We're saying stop killing people while we do it." The discussion that followed was heated but productive. By the end, they drafted a proposal for new protest protocols, designated emergency corridors at every demonstration, trained monitors to quickly clear paths for first responders, coordination with city services to ensure alternative routes were available. "Will you help us?" Tom asked Marcus directly. "Train our monitors on what to look for, how to respond quickly." Marcus considered it. Part of him wanted nothing to do with any protesters ever again. But another part recognized the opportunity. "You want me to teach protesters how not to kill patients? We want you to teach us how to fight for justice without becoming the injustice," Tom corrected. Some of us forgot that the means matter as much as the ends. After a long pause, Marcus nodded. "Okay, but we do this right. Full training program, certification, and if anyone violates the protocols, they're banned from coalition protests." The Coalition for Responsible Resistance was born that day. Within a month, they trained 50 emergency response monitors. Within 2 months, they were coordinating with similar groups in Portland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. The model spread organically, protesters policing themselves to prevent tragedy. Councilman Park's proposed legislation had evolved significantly since their bar meeting. Now called Lily's Law, after a campaign by the Patterson family, it balanced public safety with free speech rights in ways that satisfied most stakeholders. Marcus testified at the city council hearing, but it was Lily Patterson who stole the show. Now fully recovered and bursting with 6-year-old energy, she marched up to the microphone with her mother's help. "My name is Lily, and I'm 6 3/4, she announced. "When I was sick, Mr. Marcus saved me. But some people tried to stop him. That's mean. When someone is sick, you have to let the helpers through. That's the rule. Simple, clear, undeniable." The council voted unanimously to pass Lily's Law. Within 6 months, similar legislation passed in 22 states. The federal version, introduced by Washington senators, included funding for emergency corridor training and monitoring programs. Sarah Martinez's community service at Seattle Children's Hospital began with hostility from staff who knew her story. But Dr. Kumar had strategically placed her in the pediatric emergency department, where ideology meant nothing compared to dying children. Her first week was brutal. She watched paramedics race in with critical patients, saw the controlled chaos of trauma responses, held parents' hands while doctors fought to save their children. Every ambulance siren made her flinch, remembering how she'd tried to silence them. The breakthrough came during her third week. A 4-year-old arrived in anaphylactic shock, his timeline eerily similar to Lily's. Sarah watched Marcus and Jake work with smooth efficiency, saw the child's color return, heard his mother's sobs of relief. After they stabilized him, Marcus found her crying in the supply closet. "Almost took that from them," she whispered. "That moment when he opened his eyes. I almost stole that." "But you didn't," Marcus said. "And now you're here, making sure it doesn't happen again." Sarah threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd brought to protesting. She organized the emergency department's volunteer program, created educational materials about anaphylaxis for families, even started a support group for parents of children with severe allergies. The same skills that had made her an effective organizer translated into hospital advocacy. 6 months into her service, she was offered a paid position as community outreach coordinator. She accepted, dedicating herself to bridging the gap between hospitals and the communities they served. The woman who'd once blocked ambulances now cleared paths for them, literally and figuratively. Marcus found himself reluctantly thrust into a national spotlight. Medical journals published analyses of the Lily Patterson case. Time magazine featured him in an article about the heroes who choose lives over politics. He declined most interviews but accepted speaking engagements at paramedic conferences, sharing lessons learned. "We're not asking for special treatment," he told a packed auditorium in Chicago. "We're asking for the recognition that when someone calls 911, they're already in crisis. Every second we're delayed is a second stolen from someone's father, mother, child. Someone's Lily." The public response was overwhelming. Paramedics from around the country shared their stories of protest-related delays. Families came forward with tales of loved ones who hadn't been as fortunate as Lily. The narrative shifted from abstract political rights to concrete human costs. A documentary crew followed Marcus for 3 months, creating Every Second Counts, which premiered at Sundance and won 3 awards. The film's climax, footage of Lily's rescue from multiple angles, including the dash cam, left audiences in tears. Sarah Martinez appeared in the film, offering a powerful mea culpa that resonated with activists nationwide. "I believe I was fighting for justice," she said on camera. "But justice that requires innocent people to die isn't justice at all. It's just another form of oppression, dressed up in righteous language." The film sparked discussions in activist circles about tactics and consequences. Many groups adopted the Coalition for Responsible Resistance model. Others doubled down, claiming any accommodation to the system was betrayal. But the tide had turned. Public opinion now firmly supported emergency access protection. One of the most surprising developments came from the Seattle Police Department. Captain Michelle Rodriguez, who'd spent years dealing with protest-related issues, reached out to Marcus with a proposal. "We want to create a joint training program," she explained. "Police, fire, EMS, and protest organizers. Get everyone in the same room, run scenarios, build understanding." Marcus was skeptical. "You think activists will train with cops? The responsible ones will. The ones who actually care about their communities more than their egos." Rodriguez smiled. Besides, Tom Nguyen already agreed to co-facilitate. The first joint training was awkward, with protesters and police eyeing each other suspiciously. But as they worked through scenarios, a chemical spill requiring evacuation through a protest zone, a cardiac arrest at a demonstration, a building fire with blocked access, common ground emerged. "Holy shit," one activist muttered after a particularly intense scenario where delays had killed 3 simulated patients. "We've been playing with people's lives. And we've been treating you all as enemies instead of citizens exercising rights," a police officer admitted. "Maybe we both need to do better." The program expanded rapidly. Seattle's model was replicated in Portland, Oakland, Minneapolis. Cities that had seen the worst protest police confrontations, now sessions where both sides learned to protect public safety while respecting civil rights. Marcus often served as a guest instructor, his credibility with both sides making him an ideal bridge. He taught protesters how to read emergency situations, showed police the medical realities of delay, and reminded everyone that behind every call was a human being in crisis. The legal destruction of Riverside Development Group played out over 18 months. The trials revealed a staggering network of corporate manipulation affecting dozens of cities and hundreds of protests. Executives testified against each other, revealing a culture that viewed dead patients as externalities and activists as useful idiots. The CEO, Robert Hutchinson, received 25 years for conspiracy and 17 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Other executives received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The company's assets were liquidated, with proceeds going to a victim compensation fund. Several politicians fell with them. Councilman Park got 10 years after his attempt to flee proved consciousness of guilt. His testimony revealed similar schemes in 6 other cities, triggering a cascade of investigations and arrests. "We treated democracy like a game," Park said at his sentencing. "We forgot that real people pay the price for our power plays. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that." The victim impact statements were devastating. Families of those who died during orchestrated delays spoke of birthdays never celebrated, graduations never attended, grandchildren never held. Marcus attended every day of testimony, bearing witness to the true cost of corporate greed disguised as activism. The trauma of everything affected Marcus more than he initially admitted. 6 months after Lily's rescue, he found himself unable to sleep, replaying the moment of decision over and over. What if he'd been wrong? What if someone had been hurt? What if Lily had died anyway? Jake finally convinced him to see a therapist, Dr. Eric Woodland, who specialized in first responder trauma. "You made an impossible choice," Dr. Woodland said during their 3rd session. "The fact that it worked out doesn't make it less impossible. You're allowed to be affected by that." Therapy helped Marcus process not just the incident, but his entire career. The 17 patients he'd lost, the hundreds he'd saved, the weight of carrying others' lives in his hands daily. He learned to separate his identity from his job, to find worth beyond the next rescue. He started dating again, meeting Maria Gonzalez at, of all places, a coalition for responsible resistance training. She was a nurse who volunteered as a protest medic, drawn to the program after seeing what uncontrolled demonstrations could cost. Their first date involved swapping horror stories over coffee. Their second involved no talk of work at all. "You're more than the guy who drove through protesters," she told him 6 months later. "You're also the guy who makes terrible dad jokes and can't cook pasta without burning it." "Hey, my pasta is improving," Marcus protested. "Your smoke alarm begs to differ." They moved in together a year later, finding balance in shared purpose and separate interests. Maria understood the weight he carried. He understood her need to help even those who'd made bad choices. They made it work. 1 year after the rescue, the Patterson family invited Marcus to Lily's 7th birthday party. The theme, to no one's surprise, was emergency vehicles. Lily wore a paramedic costume and spent the party rescuing her guests from various imaginary ailments. "Mr. Marcus," she shrieked when he arrived, running full speed into his legs. "Look, I'm you. I see that." Marcus laughed, kneeling to her level. "But where's your partner?" "Every paramedic needs a partner. That's Mommy's job today. She's Jake." Lily grabbed his hand. "Come on, we have to save Mr. Whiskers. He ate too much cake." The party was joyful chaos, kids running everywhere, parents chatting, a bouncy house shaped like an ambulance dominating the backyard. Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time in months, watching Lily orchestrate elaborate rescue scenarios with her friends. Jessica Patterson found him during cake time. "Thank you for coming. It means the world to her. To us. Wouldn't miss it," Marcus said, meaning it. "I wanted to tell you something," Jessica continued. "I've been volunteering with the coalition, training as an emergency monitor for protests. I figure if people are going to demonstrate, someone who knows what almost losing a child feels like should be there to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Marcus felt his throat tighten. That's amazing, Jessica. You saved my daughter. The least I can do is help save someone else's. As the party wound down, Lily gave him a carefully wrapped present. Inside was a hand-drawn picture of an ambulance driving through a crowd, with stick figures jumping aside. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old printing, "My Hero" by Lily P. "Do you like it?" she asked anxiously. "I love it," Marcus said honestly. "It's going on my wall at work." "Good. So everyone knows you're the best paramedic ever." She hugged him tightly. "Thank you for making me not die." "Thank you for being so brave," Marcus replied. Driving home, the picture carefully placed on his passenger's seat, Marcus reflected on the year's journey. From a moment of crisis to a national conversation. From bitter enemies to unlikely allies. From trauma to healing. The system wasn't perfect. Protests still sometimes delayed emergency vehicles. Patients still died from preventable obstacles. But now there were protocols, training, understanding. Now there was hope for better. His phone buzzed at a red light. A text from dispatch. "Multi-vehicle accident on I-5. Can you come in?" Marcus looked at Lily's drawing, then at the road ahead. He'd be there in 10 minutes. Someone needed help, and he had the skills to provide it. Everything else, the politics, the controversy, the fame, was just noise. He flipped on his emergency lights and headed for the station. There was work to do. The earthquake of change triggered by Lily Patterson's rescue continued to ripple outward. 2 years after the incident, Marcus stood before Congress, testifying in support of the Federal Emergency Access Protection Act. The gallery was packed with first responders, activists, and families affected by protest delays. "Senators," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I'm not here as a hero or a villain. I'm here as a paramedic who's held too many dead patients, who's told too many families that we didn't make it in time. Every second matters in our work. Every obstruction costs lives." He'd prepared extensively with Rebecca Walsh. But when the moment came, he spoke from the heart. He told them about Amy, his sister who died waiting for an ambulance 23 years ago. About the 17 patients he'd lost over his career. About Lily Patterson and the impossible choice that had defined his life. "We're not asking you to silence protests or limit free speech," he continued. "We're asking you to recognize that the right to life supersedes the right to make a political point. We're asking for balance, for sanity, for the simple acknowledgement that when someone calls 911, politics needs to take a back seat to humanity." Senator Patricia Williams of California, a former nurse, asked the first question. "Mr. Chen, critics argue this legislation could be used to suppress legitimate protests. How do we protect both lives and civil liberties?" Marcus had anticipated this. "Senator, the Coalition for Responsible Resistance has shown it's possible. They've maintained emergency corridors at over 200 protests nationwide without compromising their message. In fact, their responsible approach has earned them more public support than confrontational tactics ever did." But what about spontaneous demonstrations? Situations where planning isn't possible. Even spontaneous protests can designate monitors, can respond to emergency vehicles, can choose not to kill people. Marcus replied, his voice hardening slightly. Spontaneity doesn't excuse manslaughter. The hearing continued for 3 hours. Marcus faced hostile questions from senators worried about restricting protests and supportive ones from those who'd heard from constituents about emergency delays. Through it all, he remained focused on the central message: lives matter more than politics. Sarah Martinez testified after him, a powerful bookend to his appearance. Now 2 years into her role at Seattle Children's Hospital, she'd become a nationally recognized advocate for emergency access protection. 2 years ago, I was the person blocking that ambulance, she told the silent chamber. I believed my cause justified any tactic, that inconvenience to the system was worth any cost. I was wrong, catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. She spoke about her journey from activist to advocate, from obstacle to ally. She shared stories from the pediatric ER, Children who'd lived because ambulances arrived in time. Families whole because seconds were not wasted on political theater. I've held the hands of parents whose children were dying, Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. I've seen the terror in their eyes, the desperate hope when they hear sirens approaching. Anyone who would delay that hope for any reason has lost their humanity. I know because I lost mine, and I've spent 2 years trying to find it again. Senator Michael Thompson of Texas, known for his tough questioning, leaned forward. Ms. Martinez, you were once willing to let a child die for your cause. Why should we believe you've truly changed? Sarah met his gaze directly. Because I now work 60 hours a week making sure no child dies from delays. Because I've dedicated my life to undoing the harm I almost caused. Because Lily Patterson is alive and visits the hospital sometimes, and every time I see her, I'm reminded that I nearly stole her future for a political point that no one even remembers now. Her testimony was devastating in its honesty. Several senators wiped away tears. The gallery sat in stunned silence. When she finished, Marcus caught her eye and nodded once. Acknowledgement of a journey traveled, a lesson learned in the hardest way possible. The Federal Emergency Access Protection Act passed 87-13 in the Senate, with broad bipartisan support. The House passed it 398-37. The President signed it in a Rose Garden ceremony with Lily Patterson, now 8 and still determined to become a veterinarian, by his side. This legislation isn't about limiting protest, the President said. It's about recognizing that no cause, however just, is worth a human life. It's about balance, responsibility, and the basic decency to step aside when someone needs help. Marcus watched from the crowd, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The law would save lives, but it had come too late for too many. He thought of the families who'd testified during the congressional hearings, their loved ones lost to preventable delays. Progress always seemed to require tragedy. With federal funding secured, the Emergency Corridor Training Program exploded nationwide. Marcus found himself traveling constantly, teaching both protesters and first responders how to coexist safely. The sessions were intense, emotional, and transformative. In Birmingham, he trained civil rights activists who saw parallels between their work and the responsible resistance model. Dr. King never would have blocked an ambulance, an elderly organizer told the group. The point was to expose injustice, not create more of it. In Minneapolis, he worked with police and protesters who'd clashed violently just months before. The training forced them to see each other as human beings with shared goals. Public safety and social justice weren't mutually exclusive. In Los Angeles, he encountered resistance from radical groups who saw any accommodation as betrayal. One young activist confronted him during a break. "You're teaching us to be compliant, to neuter our power." "I'm teaching you to be effective," Marcus countered. What's more powerful, a protest that saves lives while making its point, or one that kills children and turns the public against you? The activist had no answer. The most powerful session happened in Portland, where Tom Bradley had arranged for families affected by protest delays to speak directly to organizers. The mother of a 9-year-old who died from head trauma spoke with quiet dignity about her son's final moments, how she'd watched him slip away 50 feet from the hospital. "I don't hate you," she told a room full of activists. "Hate won't bring him back. But I need you to understand that your choices have consequences beyond your cause. My son paid for your principles with his life. Please don't let another child pay that price." The room was silent except for muffled sobs. Several activists left the movement entirely after that session, unable to reconcile their methods with the human cost. Others doubled down on responsible resistance, determined to protest without killing. Not everyone embraced the new paradigm. Radical elements on both sides rejected the collaborative approach. Some activists formed direct action cells that deliberately targeted emergency vehicles to expose fascist propaganda. Some police departments used the new laws to crack down on all protests, regardless of whether they maintained emergency corridors. Marcus found himself caught in the middle, criticized by extremists on both sides. Death threats resumed, now from radical activists who saw him as a traitor to progressive causes. His apartment building had to install additional security after someone spray-painted "fascist collaborator" on his door. "You can't please everyone," Maria told him one night after a particularly nasty email. "Extremists hate moderates more than they hate their opponents. You're proof that their absolutism isn't necessary." She was right, but it didn't make the threats less concerning. Marcus varied his routes, stayed alert, and trusted that doing right was worth the risk. The FBI monitored the most serious threats, occasionally making arrests when online rhetoric turned into real-world planning. The backlash extended to Sarah Martinez, who faced constant harassment from former allies who saw her transformation as betrayal. Her car was vandalized, her social media filled with accusations of selling out and bootlicking. She handled it with grace, continuing her work at the hospital and speaking nationwide about responsible resistance. "They can call me whatever they want," she told Marcus during one of their regular coffee meetings. "I know who I am now. I know what matters. Let them learn the hard way like I did. I just hope no one dies for their education." As Lily Patterson grew older, she became an unexpected advocate herself. Her natural charisma and unique position as the child whose rescue sparked a national movement made her a powerful voice. At age 9, she spoke at the National Emergency Medical Services Conference, standing on a box to reach the microphone. "When I was 6, I almost died," she began, her voice clear and confident. "But Mr. Marcus and Mr. Jake saved me. Some people tried to stop them. That wasn't nice. When someone is sick, you have to let the helpers through. It's not hard. You just move." Her simple eloquence cut through political rhetoric. Videos of her speeches went viral, shared by people across the political spectrum. She had a gift for reducing complex issues to moral clarity that adults had lost. The Patterson family established the Lilly Foundation, dedicated to emergency access education and supporting families affected by protest-related delays. They raised millions, funding everything from public awareness campaigns to scholarships for paramedic training. Jessica Patterson became a full-time advocate, traveling with Lily to speak at conferences, schools, and community centers. "We were the lucky ones," she always emphasized. Lily lived because one paramedic refused to let politics override humanity. Not every family is that fortunate. The Foundation's most ambitious project was the Emergency Access Memorial in Washington, D.C., honoring those who died from preventable delays. The memorial featured a sculpture of an ambulance with paths radiating outward, symbolizing the corridors that should always remain clear. Each path contained names and ages of victims, a permanent reminder of the cost of obstruction. Marcus attended the dedication, standing with hundreds of first responders and families. Lily, now 10, read the names of the 17 children who died from delays in the past decade. Her young voice speaking those names: Timothy Chun, 8 months. Maria Gonzalez, 3 years. James Wilson, 5 years. Left no dry eyes. "We remember them," Lily concluded, "so no more names get added. So everyone remembers that helping matters more than hurting." 5 years after the incident that changed everything, Marcus found himself back at the same intersection where it all began. The city had installed a commemorative plaque. At this site on July 15, 2024, the decision to prioritize life over politics sparked a national movement for emergency access protection. May we always choose compassion over conflict. He stood there in the early morning light, remembering the weight of that moment. The protesters' chants. Sarah Martinez on his hood. The clock ticking down on Lily Patterson's life. The decision that had seemed impossible then now felt inevitable. Of course he'd chosen life. How could anyone choose differently? "Thought I'd find you here," a voice said behind him. Marcus turned to find Sarah Martinez approaching, coffee in hand. She looked different now, the angry edge replaced by quiet purpose, the revolutionary fervor tempered by experience. "Anniversary rituals," Marcus admitted. "Can't seem to help myself." They stood together, looking at the intersection that had defined both their lives. Morning traffic flowed smoothly, commuters unaware of the history beneath their tires. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked quietly. Everything that followed, Marcus considered. The death threats, the media circus, the complete upheaval of his life. But also, Lily Patterson alive and thriving. Thousands of patients saved by faster response times. A national movement that put lives before politics. No, he said simply. Do you regret blocking us? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Every day. But maybe I needed to be that wrong to finally get it right. Maybe we all did. She paused. The hospital offered me a permanent position running emergency response coordination. I'm taking it. That's great, Sarah. Really. It feels like penance sometimes. Like I'm trying to balance some cosmic scale. She sipped her coffee. Then I see a kid come in barely breathing and leave walking. And I remember it's not about me. It never was. They parted ways, each returning to their transformed lives. Marcus had a shift starting soon. Sarah had a meeting with city officials about new emergency protocols. Both had found purpose in the aftermath of crisis. The movement sparked by Lily Patterson's rescue continued to evolve. Cities worldwide adopted emergency corridor protocols. Protest groups incorporated medical monitors as standard practice. First responder training included modules on navigating civil demonstrations. The balance between civil rights and public safety, while never perfect, had shifted towards sanity. Universities studied the Seattle model as an example of crisis creating positive change. Business schools analyzed Riverside Development's downfall as a cautionary tale of corporate manipulation. Medical schools taught the Lily Patterson case as an example of ethical decision-making under pressure. Marcus continued his work, training new paramedics who'd grown up in a world where emergency corridors were standard. They couldn't imagine a time when protesters would block ambulances, when politics trumped patients. That generational shift gave him hope. Never take it for granted, he told each graduating class. The right to save lives without obstruction was paid for with blood and tears. Honor that sacrifice by using every second wisely. He kept Lily's childhood drawing framed in his office, a reminder of why seconds mattered. Visitors often asked about it, giving him the chance to tell the story again, to reinforce the lesson that ideology should never override humanity. Jake Morrison, now a lieutenant, remained his closest friend and fiercest advocate. They'd been through hell together and emerged stronger. You know, we changed the world, right? Jake said one day over beers. We saved one little girl, Marcus corrected. Everything else followed from that. Exactly. One life at a time. That's how you change the world. Maria and Marcus married in a small ceremony at the Washington Emergency Access Memorial. Lily Patterson served as flower girl, now 13 and still determined to become a veterinarian, though she'd added, and maybe a paramedic too, to her career goals. Sarah Martinez attended, bringing full circle a journey none of them could have imagined. The wedding photos captured something profound. Former enemies united by shared purpose, celebrating love born from crisis, surrounded by reminders of lives saved and lost. It was messy and complicated and deeply human, like all the best stories. 10 years after the incident, Marcus received an unexpected package. Inside was a medical school acceptance letter addressed to Lily Patterson, now 21, along with a handwritten note. Mr. Marcus, I got in. Johns Hopkins, can you believe it? I'm going to be a doctor. Maybe emergency medicine, maybe pediatrics. Haven't decided yet. Either way, I'll be saving lives like you saved mine. I've been thinking a lot about that day. I don't remember much, just being scared and not being able to breathe. But I've watched the videos. I've read the articles. I know what you risked to save me. Because of you, I got to grow up. I got to have my first kiss, gross, graduate high school, boring, travel to Europe, amazing, and fall in love with medicine, life-changing. I got to exist. 17 other kids didn't get that chance because people thought their causes mattered more than those children's lives. I promise to honor their memory and your courage by never forgetting that every patient is someone's everything. That every second counts. That politics end where humanity begins. Thank you for choosing me over an easier path. Thank you for showing the world that one person's courage can change everything. Thank you for my life. With all my love and eternal gratitude, Dr. Lily Patterson, future tense, but sounds good, right? P.S. I still want to be a veterinarian too. Humans and animals. Why choose? Marcus read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. He thought of Amy, his sister who never got to grow up, of the 17 patients he'd lost, of all the Lilies who'd lived because people finally understood that protests couldn't cost lives. He framed the letter next to her childhood drawing, 2 bookends of a life saved and purposefully lived. Every time doubt crept in, every time the weight of that day felt too heavy, he'd look at those frames and remember, this is why. This moment, this letter, this life continuing to ripple outward in waves of positive change. One life at a time, 1 second at a time, 1 choice at a time. That's how you change the world. Marcus stood at the podium in the Seattle Convention Center, looking out at 5,000 faces. The National EMS Memorial Service had asked him to deliver the keynote address on the 10th anniversary of the incident that had changed emergency response protocols nationwide. In the front row sat the Patterson family, Jessica with gray now threading through her hair, and Lily, 21 and radiant, in her Johns Hopkins Medical School jacket. 10 years ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of a decade's reflection. I made a decision that took 30 seconds but changed millions of lives. Not because I'm special, but because sometimes history hinges on ordinary people facing extraordinary moments with clarity. He'd struggled with this speech for weeks, trying to capture everything the past decade had meant. Finally, Maria had told him to stop overthinking it. Just tell them the truth, she'd said. That's what you're good at. We gather today to remember those we lost to preventable delays, Marcus continued. 17 children whose names are etched on monuments, but should be written in the sky. 43 adults whose families still wonder what if. Countless others whose stories we'll never know because their deaths were filed under traffic delay instead of systemic failure. The convention center was silent except for his voice and the occasional muffled sob. These were his people, paramedics, EMTs, firefighters, doctors, nurses. They understood the weight of seconds, the cost of obstacles, the price of politics overriding humanity. But we also gather to celebrate transformation. 10 years ago, emergency vehicles were routinely blocked, delayed, dismissed as inconveniences to whatever cause felt righteous that day. Today, emergency corridors are sacred spaces, protected by law and conscience. Today, protesters and first responders train together, recognizing that saving lives and seeking justice aren't opposing values. He caught Sarah Martinez's eye in the third row. She now ran the largest emergency response coordination program in the nation, overseeing training for both first responders and activists. Her journey from obstacle to ally had inspired thousands to reconsider their methods and priorities. This change didn't come from politicians or policies, Marcus said. It came from a 6-year-old girl who needed help and the collective decision that her life mattered more than anyone's political point. It came from families brave enough to share their grief, from activists courageous enough to admit error, from first responders who refused to accept that patients should die for someone else's principles. After his speech, Marcus joined a panel discussion with other key figures from the past decade. Lily Patterson, now a first-year medical student, commanded attention with her unique perspective. People ask me if I feel pressure, being the Lily from Lily's Law, she said, poised beyond her years. But I don't see it as pressure. I see it as purpose. Every day I'm alive is a gift Mr. Marcus gave me. Every patient I'll save is interest on that gift. The moderator asked about her career plans. Lily smiled. Emergency medicine, definitely. Maybe pediatric emergency. I want to be the one driving the ambulance that won't be stopped. Full circle, you know. Tom Nguyen, still running the Coalition for Responsible Resistance, spoke about the evolution of protest tactics. We've trained over 50,000 emergency monitors nationwide. Not one coalition protest has resulted in a medical delay in 8 years. That's not compromise, that's evolution. We're more effective when we're not killing people. The panel discussed challenges still facing the movement. Radical cells still occasionally targeted emergency vehicles, though public backlash was swift and severe. Some cities had overcorrected, using emergency access laws to shut down all protests. The balance between rights remained delicate. Perfect was never the goal, Sarah said when asked about these issues. Better was the goal. Fewer dead kids was the goal. By that measure, we've succeeded beyond anything I imagined when I was sitting on that street, convinced my cause justified any cost. That evening, Marcus attended the grand opening of the Patterson Institute for Emergency Response Research at the University of Washington. The state-of-the-art facility would study everything from response time optimization to psychological impacts of delay-related deaths. Jessica Patterson had raised $30 million to make it reality. This isn't just about gathering data, Jessica said at the ribbon cutting. It's about ensuring that no family goes through what we almost did, that no paramedic faces the choice Marcus faced, that no activist realizes too late what their obstruction cost. The Institute's first major study had already yielded remarkable results. Response times in cities with comprehensive emergency corridor protocols averaged 3.2 minutes faster than those without. Extrapolated nationally, that meant approximately 15,000 lives saved annually, a number that made Marcus's knees weak when he first heard it. Dr. Patricia Kumar, now the Institute's medical director, pulled Marcus aside during the reception. "I've been running models based on your intervention," she said. "Not just Lily, but the ripple effects. The lives saved by faster response times. The patients who lived because of trained corridor monitors. The deaths prevented by the cultural shift." "How many?" Marcus asked, not sure he wanted to know. "Conservative estimate? 47,000 over the past decade. That's not counting improved outcomes from faster non-fatal responses." She gripped his shoulder. "You didn't just save one little girl, Marcus. You saved a small city's worth of people." The number was staggering, almost incomprehensible. Marcus thought of each as a Lily. Someone's child, parent, sibling, friend. 47,000 futures that almost weren't. 47,000 ripples spreading outward. Later that month, Netflix premiered Seconds Count, The Lily Patterson Story, a comprehensive documentary about the incident and its aftermath. Marcus had reluctantly agreed to participate, won over by the filmmaker's commitment to accuracy over sensationalism. The film was unflinching in its portrayal of all parties. It showed Marcus's agonizing decision in real time, Sarah's descent from idealism to extremism, the corporate manipulation that had weaponized legitimate grievances, the families destroyed by delays, the painful process of recognition, reconciliation, and reform. "I hated him," Sarah admitted on camera, reflecting on her initial feelings toward Marcus. "He represented everything I thought was wrong with the system, authority overriding people's voices. It took me months to realize he wasn't the system. He was just a man trying to save a child, and I was the one representing systemic cruelty." The documentary included previously unseen footage from multiple angles, painting a complete picture of those crucial minutes. Security cameras showed protesters scrambling. Dashcam footage revealed Marcus's careful, deliberate pace. Bystander videos captured the moment Sarah jumped on the hood, her face transformed by righteous fury into something harder to define. But the most powerful footage came from the Patterson's home security system, showing Jessica's frantic 911 call, her desperate attempts to keep Lily conscious, the arrival of the ambulance just as the little girl's lips turned blue. The timestamp showed they'd had perhaps 90 seconds to spare. "When people ask if I regret driving through those protesters," Marcus said in his interview, "I ask them to watch that footage, to see a mother holding her dying child. Then tell me I should have taken the long way around." The documentary won 3 Emmys and sparked renewed national discussion about the balance between civil rights and public safety. Schools used it in ethics classes. Police academies included it in training. Medical schools analyzed the decision-making process under extreme pressure. The Seattle model had spread far beyond American borders. Marcus found himself consulting with emergency services in London, Paris, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo. Each city faced unique challenges, but the core principle remained constant. Emergency access was non-negotiable. In Paris, where protests were a cultural institution, the implementation had been particularly challenging. Marcus spent a month training both responders and activist groups, navigating language barriers and centuries of tradition. The breakthrough came when a veteran protest organizer's grandson needed an ambulance during a demonstration. The corridors worked perfectly, and suddenly theory became personal. "You have given us more than protocols," the French emergency services director told Marcus. "You have given us permission to prioritize life without apology." Japan's implementation was remarkably smooth, their cultural emphasis on order and respect making emergency corridors almost self-enforcing. Marcus was moved to tears watching Tokyo protesters bow to passing ambulances, a gesture of respect that transcended politics. Brazil proved more complicated, with favela residents suspicious of any cooperation with authorities. Marcus worked with local community leaders, emphasizing that emergency access helped their neighborhoods most. Wealthy areas had multiple routes and private hospitals, while favelas often had only one way in or out. When framed as community self-protection rather than compliance, resistance melted. "Every country teaches me something new," Marcus told Maria during a video call from Sao Paulo. "But the lesson is always the same. People are good when given the chance to be good. They just need systems that make goodness easier than harm." The constant travel and speaking engagements had taken a toll on Marcus's direct patient care. After much soul-searching, he transitioned to a role as National Training Director for Emergency Response Protocols. It meant less time in ambulances but broader impact on patient outcomes. "I miss the immediacy," he confessed to Jake over beers. "The adrenaline, the direct saves. But training others multiplies my impact. Every paramedic I train might save hundreds over their career." Jake, now running Seattle's entire EMS division, understood. "You evolve with the need, brother. That's what leaders do." Marcus and Maria had 2 children now. Amy, named for his sister, and James, after a patient Marcus had saved years earlier. Raising them in a world where emergency access was protected felt like completing a circle. They'd never know the horror of watching an ambulance trapped by protesters, would never understand that such things had once been common. "Daddy's famous," 5-year-old Amy announced at kindergarten show and tell, holding up a newspaper clipping. "He saved a girl and changed the rules so ambulances can always get through." Her simplified version captured the essence better than any academic analysis. Marcus had saved a girl and changed the rules. Everything else was just details. Not everyone had Marcus's journey toward reconciliation. Some radical elements still viewed him as a symbol of authoritarian overreach. Occasionally, protests would include signs reading, "Remember Marcus Chen's violence," or "Emergency fascism." But these voices grew smaller each year, drowned out by the overwhelming evidence of lives saved. More interesting was the evolution of former opponents who'd come to support the movement. Marcus regularly received letters from activists who'd been at that intersection, sharing their journeys from outrage to understanding. One particularly moving letter came from a young woman who'd been 18 during the original protest. "I screamed at you that day. Called you a fascist pig. Threw my water bottle at your ambulance. 2 years later, my father had a heart attack at a protest. The ambulance got through the corridor we'd established, and he lived. I think about that every day, how my anger could have killed him if we hadn't learned better. Thank you for teaching us, even when we didn't want to learn." These letters formed a collection Marcus treasured more than any award. They represented minds changed, perspectives shifted, humanity recognized across ideological divides. Each one was a small victory against absolutism. As the 10th anniversary approached, a new challenge emerged. Climate change protests had intensified, with some groups advocating for total city shutdowns to force government action. The debate felt frighteningly familiar. Righteous cause versus public safety, immediate action versus long-term consequences. Marcus was called to mediate between climate activists and emergency services in Seattle. The meeting was tense, with young activists arguing that climate change was itself a health emergency that justified any tactics. "You're not wrong about the crisis," Marcus told them. "But killing patients today won't save the planet tomorrow."